Welcome everybody to a new episode of New Waylie, and believe it or not, this video will end at about the 8-month mark. That's right, 8 months since we started this city. Right now we're painting over the residential area, which we're going to get another more holistic look in just a little bit, and that in itself was about 4 months of work. Which means that when this was finished an episode or two ago, that was about 6 months into the city, because the first couple months were the park and the train station area. Now in the last video we began this commercial area, and we're actually going to be finishing this today. I do expect to do more work on it in the future, but we're going to get it to this point we're looking at right now. Apart from the round teardrop row that we're seeing on the bottom left here, most of the work today is going to be detailed. So that's why the video here is a little bit brighter, because there are more billboards, more lights, and more roads as well, more pads and things like that will be adding street lights. So this is where we'll be getting to today. Let's get started. As incredibly difficult as it is for me, we're going to be trying to build from the ground up here, instead of always making my life so much harder by building too much upwards and then having to peek down through stuff, which we're really still doing right now at this moment anyway. But we're working on this little retaining wall here because I wanted to wall up some of this. We don't really want the cliff side, you know, being that obvious in these areas. This part's meant to be a little bit nice, a little fancier, really just meant to be focused on commercial, but we're going to parkify it up a little bit for sure. So wall up the rock, sure, but we're going to be adding some grass on top and some bushes and things like that. And that's also going to work as a facade, sort of, where we're going to be putting some stores or restaurants and things like that. After all, this is a bit of an alcove at the very back of the whole complex. So this area in particular I thought would be best as being a place just for storefronts, maybe some tables out in front, while the wider, more open space area closer to the main roads are just going to be more plaza-like. Now I hope you realize what I'm doing here, where I've connected either an air road or an invisible road, and of course that clips the network here. We get this really weird cut that even creates this pavement at the joint and not the, you know, marblish kind of look that the rest of this network segment uses. However, this is going to be to our advantage because what I'm trying to make here is basically a bus stop. This is going to be one of those places where you get on or get off our flying buses. So the fact that the node has a different texture is actually great for me, because it's taking some of the work off me and I can focus on littler details like the bollards and of course our famous transition piece. I guess that part technically wasn't really a transition, but it still works to cap off, you know, cuts in our elevated roads like this. Now as we move up, we needed to continue building our pedestrian walkways. So we're dealing with a bit of a challenging area here, where we're going to be having this connect into the elevator that we've already put here. But we're also going to be providing a more walking friendly and scenic alternative to the elevator, which would be a sort of spiral path up to a higher level. Now I believe I've mentioned, if not actually shown directly before, how tricky it can be to connect paths in here, because, you know, there's obviously a path that's almost completely vertical inside that elevator, and you're trying to connect to that when most of the selection tools in the game really work by differentiating things in horizontal spaces, you know. So if you have things on top of each other, they're kind of hard to select, right? But the other problem is also the small space here, and how you have a few different nodes pretty close to each other and on vertical segments. That's kind of a lot going on, which can thus make it hard to get these connections looking very well. And you saw there that the path on the top there was a little bit narrower where it connected with the elevator, and it actually took me a very long time to adjust the position of the node or the curvature of the segment to actually make it work and have our full width area. But here I wanted to add more than just a path, because the top of this building asset isn't really the best quality. It's a pretty decent texture, especially if you're looking at it from far away, but it's also trying to depict a lot of 3D things. Like I think it really looks like there's supposed to be sort of a truss network or something there, like a beam structure, and maybe even a cloth or something it looked like in some places. So we really need to cover this up. So it's a good opportunity, you know. We can add this stair here to go up the railing of the path, add these surfaces, some planners, things like that, and now we got a nice little entrance to this area. Kind of simple though, because I figured that might be a little bit more office-like, or just something a little bit more utility, shall we say, for people. It's not really a main shopping area, right? So we're not trying to over detail here. Just make it, pleasant enough, just inviting enough, but it's not really a main focus by any stretch. Now, a bit of the randomness in what I'm doing here might be a little frustrating, a little weird to watch, so I'll be avoiding this in the future and try to group similar actions together. But I wanted to keep some of it one more time, especially in this area, because it's just to show again how improvisational my efforts are here. So I work on that little entrance there, and I'm like, oh, let's put these buildings right here, and oh, I saw that part that could use an ad, so I just plop it there. And I do think this kind of leads to problems sometimes, because I might build up too much and not realize that there's stuff I could have done before I quote-unquote covered it up, or just made it difficult to access, or even just place the camera in a way that you can see things well and see what you're doing. But on the other hand, I just don't know. Like, this is still a big experiment for me. You have to remember that this is my second city in the game. This is my first detailing attempt. So I don't really have the mindset yet, if I'm ever going to have that, to really know sort of like all the little steps, all the little things I'm going to be wanting to detail. Because there's so many things you can detail, there's so many things you can add. Like there, I'm adding this random AC thing that I normally wouldn't think to do, but it's just because we had this corner there that was just looking really ugly and we need to fill it up somehow. So it can be easy to get carried away with detailing, especially when it's things like plants or whatever that you can put almost everywhere. And I just don't really know exactly what I'm going to be satisfied with. And since my build itself is improvisational, I just don't have a good idea on how this whole thing will look anyway. So I don't have a good way to know if I really have detailed enough or not. I may have felt that what I just did was perfectly fine, but after I put these paths in, it might completely change the image of the area, right? I said this area might be more for services, right? Or some other kind of personal business instead of shopping, so I didn't want to detail it too much. But it makes a great place to also have this random path to go up, just a nice big path, out of the way. We have the space for it right here. But once you put this in, you might start getting the ideas that, you could put some ads maybe on the walls as you walk up, maybe you could do something interesting with the lights. I chose not to. I liked enough how it looks, just basic, just naturally how it is. But you could just get a different ideas, or even just get inspired even by the new look. And speaking of paths, I'm adding this really long kind of windy part on the very back here. I sped this up a lot because it actually took a really long time, surprisingly, but most of the issue I think was really just trying to find the best placement that both look good and that the game would just let me do. Because I'm not really the highest elevation here, but we are also at this cliff, so the camera was very funky to work with. I just needed a proper path here because I knew I was going to have some sort of helipad, some sort of spaceship landing site on the top of this building. So we have to have a way for people to get there, but otherwise there's really not much else to do here. I would love to see this more detailed, but I'm not going to unless I know what else is going to happen here, because this part for sure could have more on top of it. So, it's just it's an odd place where, like, it's very likely that if I'm going to build up more on it, they're going to go on those buildings or over them somehow. So I didn't really want to do too much here. So from here on out, we're really going to be focusing on building up the paths and the air roads. So just really complete all the basic access to these areas. So, of course, pedestrian paths are mainly going to be giving us floors to the whole complex, and the main places we're going to have the entrances to the buildings, and just kind of be walking around, stop at a restaurant, eat some ice cream out on the table, on the benches, things like that. But also make sure we will have our public transport access. Of course, the paths here will have vehicle access because they're closest to the building, so whenever I go ahead and put in blank buildings to make these things functional, we need to make sure that road access is as close as possible. But it's also because, similar to the residential complex, those roads, the actual air roads in front of this whole area, is going to be restricted to just our public transport. I really want to keep preserving that look, that these are not areas to be having random private vehicles or anything. This complex is going to be fully serviced by its own public transport line or lines. So we have to make sure that our little shuttle buses are going to be able to spiral up this complex and have stops at every major level, which you see me marking again with the split nodes and the bollards. Now we've got a couple of minutes that's still going to be just building paths for the most part, and detailing will come after, so I'm going to take this opportunity to revisit the lore and just where we are right now, how this fits into stuff that I've mentioned before, both as a reminder and for any new people just coming by. So, to really condense it, New Waylie is part of a project to build a sort of utopia. It was meant to be fully developed according to a well-devised plan, but things do go wrong at the very beginning. Which is why the current state of the city, if you're following the stream, looks a little bit messy. In these time lapses so far, things are still going according to plan. The residential complex that we built up, which was fairly dense, despite not really having a whole lot of households, is a place for the workers of the city, the people who are helping build up the city. And we don't have a lot, we don't really need a lot, because a lot of this is automated anyway, whether we have robots or other kinds of AI that are doing a lot of the construction, or even just like self-assembling rooms and buildings and all that. We don't really need a lot of people. But we are building at the base of the mountain here, at the base of the big train station. So, who knows whether that housing is temporary or not, but the commercial area is going to be here to stay, because that's going to be something that not only serves the current citizens, but also our future citizens and visitors as well. And this is why in the last video we started adding the first elements of the transport hub that's going to be both in front and under this commercial complex. Because we are totally planning for this area to be a transport and commercial hub, both for the local residents, but also for people coming in from other districts or even off-world. The full details will be coming out in the lore video that I've already teased, and I'm gonna go ahead and say that actually this is going to be a non-canon depiction of a canon planet and other sort of concepts from some of my sci-fi work. This can't be fully canon because obviously City Skylines is built around your typical modern city building paradigm, so it's completely different from how the cities in my sci-fi universe are imagined, but it's still going to be a representation of that. And it will be depicting just general sci-fi concepts about life in these kind of cities, whether it's something about how the transportation is used or even just those metamaterial self-reforming fences that we imagine for the backyards of some of those houses in the residential complex, even though physically in the game they're just normal fences. And I just wanted to point out a little personal element here regarding this ice cream parlor that I just added, because later, in case I forget to mention, I probably will, but just in case I forget, later I do add a university behind that. So I make that quote-unquote functional by adding a block service university thing there. And the reason for that is because my university has their own ice cream brand. So I figured an ice cream shop would be a great way to point out where the university is and just in general help me remember where I even put it. Alright, well, as you saw, we had begun the detailing, starting to put a lot of benches and tables around, starting to make it look a little bit more like a place you can not only visit, but also just sit down and enjoy the views. But right now I'm doing something a little bit extra, which is likely going to be the main focus of the next video, and this is again the parking area. Now right now I'm just adding this low path here, but the thing is, I am not going to keep parking as it is right there. Because first of all, it's underground, and I already said that I actually wanted to move away from underground. We don't really want to be disturbing the planet, the environment like that if we don't have to. But more importantly, this is a high multi-level kind of commercial area. Again, we don't want to restrict things to the ground like this. So we will be building sky parking. But that's not what we're doing right now, so here's a look at what we have done so far. And we are getting to one of the last tasks for today, and that is going to be just helping to make these things functional and try to encourage people to walk around here. What I'm doing right now is adding these block services, and that's in the workshop. They are basically just these small blocks that have all the functions of the services that you need to be adding in your cities. So I put there, I believe, a couple of schools near the ice cream place I mentioned before. I put a university, And now I'm using TMPE to pretty much just ban as many vehicles as possible in this area because I want those to be pedestrian roads. They are designed that way anyway, so we only want to allow service vehicles there at a minimum, except for these other areas where we are going to allow buses. And so I probably didn't include this earlier in this video or in the previous video, but I did finish making all the bus lines here, and that was before I made the roads invisible, because it's very important to remember that if your roads are invisible, so are the transport lines, that you're not going to see them at all. They're not going to be like these floating, they need to be on the surface of a road. So you have to make sure that your roads are visible while you draw the transport lines, and then once you're sure everything's fine, then you can make it invisible. After that, it was detailing time, although I didn't want to go too far with this because, again, this area is mostly for the workers, so I had the idea that I don't really want things to be too fancy, right? Like, we have no one to impress here. That's basically what's going on. So we want things to be fairly comfortable, fairly welcoming, but the normal citizens that people we're trying to attract aren't going to be here yet. If this area ends up supporting them, which is partly what's expected anyway, then we will do some sort of renovations. But for now, we're going to keep things fairly simple. So that might be a little disappointing because I'm definitely not pushing my creativity to make these areas as nice as they could be, and even I myself, I'm probably not going to resist, and I want to touch up that first floor a little bit more, make it a little bit more interesting. I do want to show some sort of historical progress in this city. So right now we're at the stage where we don't have normal civilians in yet. I hope that doesn't bite me when I come back, because I might have ended up adding stuff on top of it, and then it's going to be really hard to look down and add things at the lower levels. Anyway, here we are at our transport loop, and we've done a little bit of work here that I guess was lost. Mainly, I added a station platform network on both sides of the road, and that took me a very long time because I was really being careful to make sure it lined up perfectly with the curbs in the roads themselves. So there was a lot of little alignment issues, but overall, like in general, it's not that difficult of a thing. The cool special thing that you saw me do here, though, was using these lights and procedural object letters to create this holographic sign. Now, these lights are always on floodlights, I think they're called. Of course, they will be in the description, but they're very bloomy, as you see, and don't really have that much range to them, so they're perfect for faking projection, I think. So I first added a random board just to give me a clear backing for where these letters are going to be, a way to align them all. And then I decided to make the letters 2D to really push the idea that these are holograms. But when they were 3D, it looked too much like an actual thing, right? Like it could be a block of wood or plastic or something. But making them 2D really made the difference. And with this, the big first stage of the city is complete, because we have our first residential complex, we have some individual houses for our supervisors and leaders or whoever they are, we have this commercial area, and we have the beginnings of a transport hub. Well, it already kind of is a transport hub because it has buses and trams. Yeah, that's it. However, coming up next time will be the beginnings of the expansion of this transport hub, mainly by building a big parking network over it, which is mostly going to be invisible because this is an age of hover cars after all. And then after that, something will be going wrong off-world, and we'll be rushing some expansion in this city, so stay tuned for that. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and you know what? Hit that little bell by the subscribe button if you actually want to be notified of when I post new videos, because otherwise I guess it's just going to randomly give it to you on your homepage eventually sometime, who knows when. So go ahead and do that if that's what you're feeling. Otherwise, come by the stream so you can join in the conversation as well, and maybe even to help populate my Discord. You can also follow on Twitter, Reddit, whatever else. You know what? It doesn't matter. You know where to find me right here or on the stream. So wherever you may be, good morning, good afternoon, and good